So we are back. Revolution is in the books for 2024. Sting has had his last match. He is going to retire undefeated and tag team champion. And I can't wait to pick Eric's brain. What a night. What a celebration. It's still happening live inside the arena. Scotty Riggs on looking alongside Magnum TA, and Nikita Koloff is there, and little shout out for Tony Schiavone. Special moment as Sting is now embracing his sons who came out as sort of Wolfpack Sting and USA Sting. What'd you think, Eric? Sting's last match in the books. You're muted, Pat.
Through the crowd. I mean, the crowd was so into it. How could you not be excited about that match? I'm not even going to comment on the type of match. It's not my favorite. Everybody knows that it was a gimmick match. But you know what? In this case, I think it was a good choice. It was a great choice. The match had drama, great psychology. I love the fact that Sting, brought his two sons with him, dressed in the previous incarnations of the Sting character. That was a cool little touch. A couple nice video packages, setting everything up, setting the mood. But the crowd was so ready for this that how could you not enjoy it?
Really special. Right now inside the arena, Sting has made his way to the top of the stage, and he's hugging all the talent. He started with Dax Harwood, and then Chris Jericho, and then Tony Khan, and now Wardlow. And he's making his way through. It's a sellout out of the curtain, they used to say, but this time it's not behind the curtain. They're out front. Man, it's an outpouring of Sting today. It was a special day for sure. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. You want to talk about high stakes? I never expected to see glass used in this last match. Darby Allin came up looking like a scene from Passion of the Christ movie. I mean, that's death match city right there. And he even joked off air, hey, I'm going to run to the hospital right quick. I think that's a good call. But yeah, man, they got me all in the feels. I thought the video that led to Sting's last match, the little last minute pre-hype video of him in the theater, was tremendous. And then we actually got to see the entrance itself with his sons coming out as the different incarnations. And then here comes the Metallica song. Just really a special night, a special moment. If this is the type of match he wanted and the type of story he wanted to tell, he's going around ringside now, shaking everybody's hand. What a class act Sting is. I think this is the proper farewell, man.
Well, and this is the part I wanted to see. The other day you and I taped 83 Weeks, which will air tomorrow, obviously, first thing in the morning. And we talked about, or you asked me, what do I hope to see? And I'm seeing what I hope to see. What I hope to see was Steve Borden enjoying the moment, sucking up every bit of emotion, so that he remembers every second of this night. And I'm sure that he will. You think about what has he been in the business, 37 years, 36 years, whatever it's been. His career really started off in the same building in many respects. What a big night. And Tony there and JR, listening to them on commentary. I was in the chat room earlier during the show, and when JR came on, I said, man, this is like macaroni and cheese for my ears. It's comfort food for my head, listening to Tony and JR. It was such a classy move. Glad Tony pulled that together.
As we know, Sting just turned 64 years old last year. So here in just a few weeks, he will be 65. And, as a young man, I've always heard, when you retire at 62, 65, or you're on the work forever plan. Well, we know Sting is off the work forever plan. He's going to retire just a day shy of his 65th birthday. And that's what's crazy to think, too, the longevity of this character. Like, I think when WCW went down, a lot of people assumed that was the last time we would see Sting wrestle. That was March 26, 2001. We didn't really see him again until 2005 in TNA. That's a long time to lay off before you come back. I think most people would have assumed that was it. And then, as we said, every year with TNA, we were told, hey, it's just a 1-year deal. Are you surprised that Sting was still active here in 2024?
I was. Sting doesn't necessarily enjoy the public eye. He's a very, very private person. And I think his character, one of the reasons that, Sting probably felt as comfortable in the industry as he did is he was able to maintain his anonymity outside of the ring.
Yes.
Obviously in Atlanta, people knew who he was, but outside of Atlanta and out in the public, because he always wore the face paint and the gimmick and was always dressed up, he was able to throw on a cap and a pair of sunglasses and just kind of be a regular guy. But the fact that Steve is not the kind of guy that just needs the limelight, that surprised me more than anything, that he stayed in the industry as long as he did, because he made a lot of money. He didn't do it because he needed to. He did it because he loved it. Good for him.
Good for him indeed. He's just made his way to David Crockett. He is at this very moment hugging David Crockett, having just greeted Magnum and Nikita. And it's really cool to see how many people showed up to pay respect to Sting and just hanging around ringside, including his longtime agent for personal appearances. Gilbert was there in the front row. Did it meet your expectations as far as checking all the nostalgia boxes, but also trying to have a modern presentation of Sting? I mean, I don't know what I expected, but I was pleased. As I mentioned, I liked the pre-match video and the special entrance, and it felt special. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for.
It did. And the Young Bucks, I know I've been critical of their heel personas because they just don't make good heels, in my opinion. But they worked their ass off. They were 100% committed to make this match as good as it could possibly be, as did Darby, obviously. Everybody put in 1,000% effort, and I'm happy for all of them. I really am. It's great for the Young Bucks to have been part of this. It's great for Darby Allin to be a part of this. These guys will remember this all their lives. This will be a highlight of their careers, something that they'll be talking about forever. And that's magic when those moments happen, especially when you know that they're happening. Oftentimes you don't realize that something that you didn't realize was going to be important to you 20 years down the road. You don't know it in the moment. But I think in this moment, everybody in that ring, everybody at ringside knew that this is going to be one of those special memories. And I'm happy for every single one of them, including the audience that got to be there and see it live.
What's unfortunate is it wasn't all high fives everywhere all night long. We started the show not too long after the show started. People started having problems with their Bleacher Report experience. Tony Khan even tweeted out, "Thank you for watching hashtag AEW Revolution tonight. For anyone with issues ordering on at Bleacher Report, I understand BR's app has now fixed the issue on most platforms. Plus, just to ensure everyone can view the pay-per-view, we've now been cleared to offer Revolution on Fight TV in the US as well." Now, we don't know how big of an issue this was, Eric, but just so everyone listening understands, Fight has always had the rights, as I understand it, to broadcast their pay-per-views for AEW internationally, just not domestically. Of course, Warner Brothers, being the television partner for AEW, they would like to get a shot at that revenue. So they've used the AEW relationship to drive traffic to Bleacher Report, which, as far as I know, is the only reason anyone uses that app. And I guess there were some issues tonight. And you, once upon a time at a Halloween Havoc, had some similar issues. Huge pay-per-view, a lot of people interested in Goldberg DDP, but yikes, maybe the system failed. This could be a big deal for AEW, could it not, if they're missing out on some revenue or a bunch of refunds are forced?
Yeah, it could. You're going to have people that are pissed off, but I would imagine if they've found a way to make the pay-per-view available on Fight, and I'm sure that they'll make some other accommodations. People will be pissed off. They'll make a lot of noise because people generally just like to bitch about shit. That's just kind of like the nature of it all. But they'll get over it. I'm sure it'll be fine.
I'm sure it'll be fine too. And it was a fine pay-per-view. That's the way I would describe it. I'm not going to say it was the best AEW pay-per-view we've seen so far, top to bottom, but I will say that main event left a lasting impression. It was memorable.
I'm glad it was the main event, because before the show we were talking about, there was some confusion as to whether or not it was going to be semi-main or main event. And I'm glad it was. I can't imagine doing it any other way.
I can't either, especially with all the dignitaries and him wanting to take time to address the crowd and all that. This was just a no-brainer. Tony got it right, and I'm glad to hear it. We also ran some polls during the actual show itself, and one of the comments I saw was, "Were you happy with Sting's last match?" Loved it. Got 51%. It was good. Got 19%. Disappointed was only 7%. And if Sting's happy, I'm happy. Got 23%. If Sting's happy, I'm happy. I like the sound.
That's what I fall into. If Sting's happy, I'm thrilled.
Yeah, I totally agree. We greatly appreciate you guys being a part of us live here. They officially finished the feed here from Revolution, so I'm sure they're going to get ready to do the press conference. We're going to hang around. We actually have a friend of ours, Wesley Burleson, a team member here from adfreeshows.com, who's actually attending the show tonight with his dad. He grew up going to WCW shows with his dad, and now he's got an opportunity to be there tonight. I think that's cool, and one of the reasons that I'm such a big wrestling fan, that generational piece we talked about before. But Eric, he says that 90% of the merch at the show tonight was Sting, and the lines were just absolutely crazy. I guess that's no surprise that the lines were crazy. Everybody wants to get a little keepsake from tonight. But Sting having a big merch night tonight. Is it 1997 or what?
No, it's just a great night in 2024.
We should talk about the entire pay-per-view, and we want to hear from you guys. If you've got a question for Eric, we would love to hear from you. So just hit us up in the chat, and we will make our way over. Want to give a shout out to Andrew D, who's a new member of our little club here, the Bischoff World Order on 83weeks.com. If you're interested in becoming a member, we've got that pinned to the top of our comments here on YouTube. Shout out to Andrew D. Appreciate you joining. Hey, how about Mick Mac? He's got a little comment, and he says, it looks like Eric had a great nap during the pay-per-view. What'd you think overall, Eric? Were you entertained, or did you doze off a little bit?
No, I watched the whole thing. I didn't take a nap, you fucking idiot. Mick Mac, come on.
Yeah.
No, I went back in the house. I'm out here in the bunkhouse or the makeshift studio. But I went back in and took my computer with me, and I had the computer up on my desk while I was watching television. So I was kind of watching both. Look, I'm not going to lie. I'm happy for Sting. I was excited for the main event. I think it turned out great. The emotion was there. Everybody in the arena was thrilled. Sting, I'm sure, is happy. Everybody's happy. But I thought the undercard, with the exception, obviously, of Ospreay and Takeshita, that was pretty cool to watch. That was an art form. You saw artistry in motion in that match. The rest of it was, it wasn't bad. I think I'd probably give it a 6, maybe a 6.5 up until the main event. Up until Ospreay and Takeshita. That bumped it up to about a 7.5, just the quality of that match. And I was excited to see that. The rest of it, though, was okay. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. I think there was too much sameness in it for me. It's like at one point I made a mental note. Does everybody in the locker room wear black tights on pay-per-views? I mean, I've never seen so many people wearing black tights on one pay-per-view in my life. In the matches, I didn't time it. I don't do that shit. But it felt like every one of the matches was almost exactly the same length. And the pacing, with the exception of Ospreay and Takeshita, the pacing of the matches were so similar that it just felt very redundant to me.
Well, let's talk about some of the matches. I watched with our friend Cassio Kid. He stopped by on his way home from a podcast that he did on the road, and he actually popped in right before we finished our live stream, forgetting, I think, that you and I were going live. And so we wound up getting to watch it, and he thought, his comment afterwards was, hey man, that was a great pay-per-view, a little too long, could have done without the 8-man scramble. And I'm seeing a lot of comments that are saying, hey, that scramble was just a filler match. Of course, we talked over the 2 pre-show matches, the Bang Bang Scissor Gang taking on Jeff Jarrett's group, Willie Mack and Private Party, Chris Statlander tagging with Willow Nightingale to beat Julia Hart and Sky Blue. And then we started with Christian Cage and Daniel Garcia. They were in there for the TNT Championship. They went 16 minutes and 50 seconds. Christian Cage got the win. I enjoyed the match. I think that Christian's doing the best work of his career, at least my favorite stuff that he's done that I've seen. So give me more Christian, but that match maybe a little long. What do you think?
Same thing. Less is more. Christian looks sharp. I mean, he's precise in everything that he does. He's fluid. His timing is still great, but I think a 16-minute match is just a little bit more than we needed. You know, I'd much rather see a shorter, faster pace match with kind of a surprise finish to get the audience ignited and on the edge of their seat, especially at the beginning of a pay-per-view. But, you know, that's a little nitpicky. You know, I think if that match would have come in under 12 minutes, it would have served a better purpose, but it was still a very solid match.
Yeah, I really appreciated it. And here's one of the things I like that AEW at least tries to do. And I know that the veteran won, but that's a big match for Daniel Garcia to have 16 minutes on pay-per-view against an established star like Christian is a really big deal. Even if he doesn't win, he's such a young talent. He's going to be here for the long haul, I'm sure. And pairing legends and the young talent together, something I can get behind. The next match I enjoyed, it was Eddie Kingston and Bryan Danielson, two of my absolute favorites. I think Eddie Kingston has some of the most realistic promos in all of wrestling. I think Bryan Danielson's been the best wrestler in the world for about 20 years now, and I enjoyed the match. But I could see how if you were watching for 5.5 hours, you could think, I don't know, 19 minutes, maybe that was a little long. What do you think?
I didn't like it at all.
Why not?
I just didn't. I don't think it showcased Bryan's wrestling ability at all. I think Eddie Kingston's over-reliance on chops, and by the way, they look horrible. I'm not going to bullshit. As much as I want to stay positive, you asked me a question, I'm not going to lie. I just thought that it just looked sloppy, and he looked exhausted way too early. I'm not saying he was, but the way he sells. Eddie Kingston just sells exhausted, and he does it way too soon. I did not like that match at all. I had a hard time watching it, to be honest with you.
Well, Bryan Danielson just won the Bryan Danielson Award for Best Wrestler of the Year in the Wrestling Observer newsletter. So I'm sure we'll have to take that up with the voters next year.
And I'm not saying Bryan Danielson isn't the best wrestler. I'm just saying this match didn't do anything to showcase his abilities.
Copy that. The next match was probably the biggest miss for me, but I don't know that it was necessarily any single performer's fault. It was an all-star scramble, which sounds like a breakfast item for my fat ass. It sounds like something they sell down at the Waffle House or IHOP. But what it was is Wardlow in there with Chris Jericho, Powerhouse Hobbs, Lance Archer, Brian Cage, Hook, Dante Martin, and Magnus. And I said, I'm not too familiar with Magnus in our live chat. And I was even told inside the arena
I was expecting Nick Aldis to come out from underneath the hood. I was going, how'd they do that?
As I understand it, Magnus works with CMLL, and hey, I'm glad he's here and glad he got a payday. But where was Commander was something I heard that a lot of people inside the arena were thinking. I know that Vikingo's hurt and he's going to be on the shelf for a bit, but it seems like they had a lot of brand equity and established already with Commander. And if this is all-star, it's almost like it's not his actual debut, but it feels more like a debut for Magnus. I thought the thing that was a little weird for me is when the four big guys were in there chopping meat, I suppose is the industry term, the fans started chanting meat. And as we've heard from Wesley, boy, Greensboro really liked chanting meat. What'd you think of that exchange in the middle of that match, Eric?
Yeah, it's those one syllable words that people love to chant. It just makes it so much easier when there's not multi-syllables. And it's kind of cool just to chant meat, meat, meat. I do that before dinner every night now that I'm on the carnivore diet. I start thinking meat, 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 and before I know it, I'm chanting it as I'm flipping steaks. I don't want to say I hated it, but technically, I guess I watched it, but I didn't pay attention to it. It was just too much, too sloppy, too. How's that?
If you want to ask Eric a question, that's why we're here. Be sure to go ahead and fire down, ask Eric a question, and we will get to it. We're going to run through the rest of the matches. Then we're going to shout out to our buddy Wesley Burleson, who was actually inside the arena tonight. And yes, if the press conference gets started, we've got somebody there taking notes for us to discuss as well. So after the All-Star Scramble, which went 15 minutes and 45 seconds, it was a mess. It was, but they tried. But you got that many guys in a match. It feels like we're just trying to get guys on.
Yeah, can you imagine those guys? I mean, I've sat through thousands of these scenarios, but can you imagine being back in a locker room when all of those guys are laying that match out?
It's got to be incredibly hard to coordinate and set up. And
okay, you stand there now. Don't move too far to your left or your right. Just kind of stand there and turn, and then I'm going to hit you with this, and then turn the other way, and he's going to. I mean, it's just, that's got to be tough laying that out, and
it's got to be
trying to make it look exciting. It's bizarre, whatever.
I understand, you don't want to have a show like this where you don't have anything for a big star like Chris Jericho to do. And if you're not knee deep in a story, you got to use him somewhere. I get that.
No, I don't think that's true though, Conrad. That I think the opposite of if I'm a talent and you don't have anything meaningful for me to do not put me on television, because just putting me out there to check the box means that I'm doing something that doesn't matter, and I don't want the audience seeing me do shit that doesn't matter.
I get that on some level.
I don't want to just show up and I had a match on TV. Well, yay. It's not like the first time Chris Jericho's ever had a match on television.
Well said. Don't disagree with any of that. If I was buying a ticket to the show and I bought it to see Chris Jericho when they went on sale because he's been on every other AEW pay-per-view, I might be disappointed if he wasn't here. So I get what you're saying, but I also get from a ticket buyer standpoint, damn it, I wanted to see Chris Jericho. Well, we saw him, but it was kind of a match that was just there. Next up, we saw Roderick Strong, and what a lot of people had to think was an upset, getting a win over Orange Cassidy. Orange Cassidy has been one of the biggest draws, certainly in terms of attention and media. I mean, if you go look at the most watched videos on AEW YouTube, a good chunk of those are Orange Cassidy videos, and he's been the most dominant international champion, or whatever you want to call it, because I know before it was the All Atlantic. That really has been Orange Cassidy's belt. He's made that belt matter, and now it's off him. It's on Roderick Strong, a very capable performer who we've seen in Ring of Honor and in NXT, and now he's a part of this faction in AEW, and they got some gold tonight. What do you think of Orange Cassidy and Roderick Strong?
I had fun watching this one. I've always enjoyed Orange Cassidy. When the first time I saw him work, I was like, that's different, but you know how I am about different. He's very unique, very, very unique. I like his style. I like what he brings to the table. I like the fact that Roderick Strong got a win that felt like, to me at least, somebody that's at best a passive viewer of AEW product. Don't follow it regularly or closely, but it felt like it kind of came from out of nowhere. I think it probably surprised a number of people, and I thought it was executed really, really well. So hats off to both of them, but I'm a big Orange Cassidy fan. I know I don't talk about that much, but I enjoy his work.
I enjoy his work too. The Real Life Jim is a heck of a guy, and I think a lot of the people who have decided they don't like the character would like the real guy. Let's talk about the next match. Boy, this was a different match for sure. It was our longest match so far. They went 21 minutes and 50 seconds. You got FTR in there taking on the Blackpool Combat Club, this time made up of Jon Moxley and Claudio Castagnoli. They have had a couple of TV matches, and man, they couldn't be contained. So we put them on pay-per-view, and we're in Greensboro. So why not have Moxley and Claudio come out sporting the Road Warrior shoulder pads? And then, of course, we saw FTR come out to the purple smoke like it was Starrcade back in the day. I liked it for what it was. Hard-hitting stuff. It looked like they took their time, too. I kind of thought that might be the case when they were doing more technical wrestling, but we were a bloody battle by the end. What'd you think?
Solid. You know, it's again, not the kind of match that I particularly look for. I like more of a traditional wrestling match. This was kind of a hardcore exhibition, if you will. But that being said, it was still a good match. I enjoyed watching it. I love Claudio. I think he's a phenomenal performer. I don't think we saw the best of Claudio in this particular match because of the nature of the match, the way it was designed. But it was a solid match that I enjoyed. Better than solid. Like, it was a good match. I enjoyed it.
The press conference is just now starting for AEW. We're going to keep rolling along here as we talk about the ladies' match. Timeless Toni Storm is victorious. She picks up a win over Deanna. They went 12 minutes and 15 seconds. What'd you think, Eric?
Solid, slightly disappointed, and I think that's only because I had such high expectations for Toni Storm. I love her character work and the way she's been presented, and I think it's so stylized and so cool and so different that I guess because of that, my expectations were a little bit higher than perhaps they should have been. It was a solid match. There was nothing wrong with it, but I don't think the match lived up to the character. Yet it will. She'll grow. She'll get better.
The character known as Samoa Joe is behind the microphone at the press conference right now, fielding some questions. The next match after the ladies, I think, was the show stealer. When we did a little bit of a preview earlier in the week, I suggested this is probably going to steal the show, and I think it did. Will Ospreay has planted a flag firmly in American soil. He ain't no joke. What a performance he and Takeshita had. I was kind of shocked because, as I mentioned, I was watching with my pal Cassio, and he said, man, these guys are crisp. How many times have they wrestled? They probably wrestled a ton, huh? Nope, that was their first match, boys and girls.
Wow.
They've had one other match, and you saw it. It was a 6-man tag where they were on the same team. So for those guys to be as young as they are, as good as they are, man, I thought that was a statement match, a coming out party for both performers. And I know that, there may be some people who are listening to this who don't enjoy that type of match. Well, let me give you a little heads up. Don't watch AEW ever again, because that match is super serving the AEW base. The hardcores, that's what they want to see. Wesley Burleson, our on-site correspondent, said besides Sting, the loudest pop, and it wasn't close, was for Will Ospreay. Even when they were just showing his name or graphic on the screen, people were going bananas for him. So he might not be a household name yet, but to the hardcores who love and pay their hard-earned money for AEW, well, he's their guy, and it was easy to see why after a performance like that, right, Eric?
You know what I was thinking? I mean, it was so good. And Will Ospreay is just, he's otherworldly when it comes to what he's capable of doing in the ring. And, his timing, his balance, everything that the pacing, his selling, he sells really, really well. Sometimes I assume incorrectly, obviously, that, a guy with the kind of offense and athleticism of Will Ospreay will probably not be so great at selling. His selling is its own unique art form, but he's good at it, man. He sells real. He doesn't sell dead. I just thoroughly enjoyed this match from both of them, Takeshita as well. I just feel a little bit more I feel a stronger character in Will Ospreay. There's something about his use of facials, and he takes his time with his body language and positioning. He's such a star. Now, the only thing I will say, and again, this is going to sound like a shot, I don't mean it to be, but he's so fucking good that he's going to make everybody underneath him just want to have hardcore matches, because you don't want to be compared to that guy. You just don't.
So talented, really a special performer. A lot of people think he's the next Kenny Omega. I've heard other people say he's the next AJ Styles. I think he's the first Will Ospreay.
I agree with that. He's unique enough. He is unique enough. I wouldn't compare him to either of those two. As much as I respect AJ and not taking anything away from Kenny Omega either, but I think Ospreay is unique in his style and his abilities.
I hope he's okay, because that spot on his lower back was brutal looking, and it got worse looking as the match went on. I hope he's all right. I would not be surprised to hear that there's going to be some, residual effects from that deal. I also want to mention that this, as far as I know, is his first pay-per-view as a contracted full-time AEW performer. I am curious to see what they do next with him, because it felt like they were anxious to sort of announce, see him again this Wednesday against Kyle Fletcher. I wanted to see what you thought of that, where we're announcing a television match on a pay-per-view. And I don't know if they said for sure, but it might be for the Ring of Honor Television Championship. What'd you think of that?
I said I wasn't going to be negative, so I won't be.
Okay.
Let's just move along.
Copy that. I'm anxious to see what happens next with Ricochet. I bring that up because once upon a time, before Ricochet or Will Ospreay were quote unquote made men in wrestling, they had a performance that had everybody talking, and a lot of veterans like Vader saying that ain't wrestling. Did you ever see the Ricochet Will Ospreay exchange, Eric?
No, I never did.
When we finish, you should go look it up and check it out, because it makes me wonder, when Ricochet's contract is up, if he thinks there's an opportunity maybe to switch jerseys and come recreate that, you got to think Tony Khan be all over that. We also said we would have the world title, and before we actually ducked out of here, we were led to believe that this would close the show. They got it right if that was the original plan. It's hard for me to imagine that, but Samoa Joe was successful in retaining his AEW World Championship over both Hangman Adam Page and Swerve Strickland. The story they're trying to push, of course, Eric, is that Swerve wants to become the first African-American AEW World Heavyweight Champion, and Hangman Adam Page would like to be champion, but he's already been champion before. What he's more interested in is making sure that Swerve never is. What'd you think of the match?
I kind of enjoyed it. I'm a Joe fan, so I'm biased going into it just because I enjoy watching Joe. A ton of respect for him. So even noting my own internal biases, I still think it was a pretty solid match. Again, I think it could have cut about 3 or 4 minutes off of it. It would have served everybody better. Got a little tired at the end of it. Everybody was a bit exhausted, a little more than we really needed. But overall, I enjoyed it. I'm glad I watched it. I felt good when it was over. So it was a winner for me.
It was a fun match. I enjoyed it. I can't lie. I was hoping that Swerve Strickland would have won the world title. I guess maybe that's not in the cards right now. We'll see what happens next. And I wonder, if you were booking, what would you do next with the world title? Like Samoa Joe, who would be your next challenger at, we'll call it, Dynasty? Because as we heard today, they've announced and created a new pay-per-view. We heard earlier in the week that they had applied for a trademark called Dynasty. Now we know that's the name of the St. Louis pay-per-view that's going to happen on Sunday, April 21st. So just a couple of weeks after WrestleMania. But normally they didn't have an April pay-per-view. Normally May would be the Vegas show, Double or Nothing. And now we're getting an extra one. What would you think they wind up doing with Samoa Joe there?
I have no idea. I don't watch the show consistently enough to get a feel for creative for it. No idea. Fantasy booking isn't my thing.
Main event. Any last words about Sting and Darby Allin and their match against the Young Bucks?
No, the only thing I would have, and this is just a little tiny thing, but they had Flair there. They had Steamboat there. I would have loved to see those, both of them up there with Sting at the very end, just to kind of put a button on the nostalgia of it all. But look, there's a lot going on, and a lot of people in the ring, and everybody getting their flowers, and it was really all about Sting anyway. But I love seeing Ricky there. I love seeing Rick there. Would have loved to see them both standing there with Sting at the very end, just to have the picture, I guess, of those three. But other than that, man, I had fun. I enjoyed watching it. I'm glad I did, and glad that everybody joined us. Follow up with this.
Absolutely glad that everybody joined us. Let's talk about some of the controversy. There was a tweet that came out right after the end of the show from PW Insider's Dave Scherer. Dave Scherer has been pretty vocal about AEW and his opinion, which isn't always glowingly positive or supportive, like maybe a Brian Alvarez or Dave Meltzer tend to be.
Brian Alvarez. I heard Brian Alvarez absolutely trashing AEW the other day. The chaos backstage and all that. So I was shocked. Usually Brian and Dave are like infomercials, but not so much the other day.
Dave Scherer tweets out, AEW is the safest place to work in wrestling. Sure it is. I'm so glad I didn't spend $50 to support this. Darby is a moron and Tony Khan is an enabler at best. Man, I don't know. I just kind of didn't expect to see that. I agree. I thought it was dangerous and unnecessary, but I've kind of come to expect that from Darby Allin and know that, hey man, that's what makes Darby Darby. And if he's going to do that, then have at it. I guess that's probably the same way you felt about Cactus Jack once upon a time. What do you think of Dave Scherer's comments that Darby is a moron, Tony is an enabler at best, and he's glad he didn't spend $50 to support this?
Boy, I thought I was tough on AEW. Holy smokes. I'm an advocate compared to those comments. Look, I'm not a fan of what Darby does. I think it's unnecessary. I don't think it's good for the business. I know people love watching it. Everybody loves their holy shit moments or a reason to chant, this is awesome. That's part of the experience. And I get that. But in the long run, I think it's too dangerous. I think when talent becomes overly reliant upon those kind of high spots to create the emotion, and they set the expectations as high as they do when it comes to that kind of abuse, I just don't think it's a good thing. I don't. I think the blood is too much. I think I've talked about this so many times in 83 weeks. For the business, the sake of the business of the wrestling business, I just don't think it's a great idea. You mentioned Mick Foley. It's one of the reasons I had to let Mick Foley go, is because Turner was concerned that there's going to eventually be litigation because of some of the things that Mick was doing. He was either going to hurt himself or somebody else. So I get it. I understand. People love it. They're bloodthirsty. They want to see that crazy shit until somebody gets seriously hurt. And then everybody turns against it. How could they let them do that? It's just a matter of time, unfortunately. I hope it doesn't happen. Grateful if it doesn't happen, but it will. It's just a matter of time.
The poll that we ran on YouTube was, what are your thoughts on Darby Allin's crazy spot? And one of the options was crazy, loved it. That got 43%. Sick, hated it. That got 9%. He did it for Sting, got 23%. Just wasn't needed, got 26%. It's pretty crazy to think that, we're talking about a spot in the match more than the finish of the match.
And that's in that in itself, Conrad, is a reason why it was too much. And
Yes.
I agree with whoever said it wasn't necessary, was 100% on the money.
Yeah.
That move did not get Sting over. That move did not get the match over. That move satisfied the appetite of those people in the audience that love that kind of match. And Darby did it for Darby. Darby didn't do it for Sting. I know he won't want to hear that. I know fans of Darby's aren't going to want to hear that. But I've seen this stuff go down so many times before. I've listened to the conversations that surround it. This is Darby making sure Darby got his shit in. And I just don't think it was necessary. That's being honest. I would say this to his face. I'm not being critical. It's not my thing. I don't enjoy it. I do fear for injury that I do believe is going to happen in a matter of time. But more importantly, I don't think it was necessary for this match. It wasn't about Darby. It wasn't about how tough or crazy Darby is. That's not what this was about. This was about Sting. And no one's going to be able to convince me that Darby doing what Darby did and getting so bloody and getting that holy shit spot was necessary in a match where there was so much going on.
To recap some of the comments from the press conference so far, Samoa Joe was there and he was asked about the Swerve Strickland comment from Huntsville, where he said, I'm going to beat you so bad, you're going to have to go back and do more commentary in a poncho, referencing Joe at WrestleMania in Tampa a few years ago. And Sean Ross Sapp asked him about that, and if he ever doubted being back in this spot. And Joe replied, I'm still a millionaire, and Swerve got his ass whooped by the announcer in a poncho.
That's why I like Joe.
I love that so much.
That's just the best. They should have ended the press conference right there. Thank you all very much, ladies and gentlemen. We heard from Samoa Joe. It's all going to go downhill from here. Let's go. Good night, everybody.
Next up was Will Ospreay. He came out and asked the crowd, can I show you my ass? Not going to show you the whole cheek, but it is so bad. And he dropped trowel there to show that spot we were talking about, his lower back. Woof. It still looks pretty gnarly. And he said the worst part of this is going to be learning not to swear, because you're not able to swear here like he could in New Japan. I guess that has to be a bit of a challenge to get used to. If it's carte blanche, like maybe it once was in ECW, when you get to WCW, it's kind of like telling a comedian, hey, you can't work blue here. You got to work clean. It's a different deal, right?
It is, but you get used to it quickly. Well, you'll adjust. You'll get there. Takes a couple of days, but you're over in Japan. You can motherfuck each other upside down, inside out, because nobody can understand what you're saying. It's easier.
Well, there you go. I also wanted to mention that we
that's where I got Mucker Feather from, by the way. I didn't make that up.
Japan?
No, it was in Japan. I had some Japanese guy call me a Mucker Feather. He got it mixed up, so I thought that'd make a good t-shirt.
That is tremendous, you Mucker Feather. Tony Khan at the press conference said tonight was one of the best nights of his life. So that's pretty cool. I'm glad that he's as pumped about giving Sting his last match as we were to see it. Will Ospreay is now begging Tony Khan, don't pull me from the planned AEW Dynamite match with Kyle Fletcher. I can work hurt. Speaking of working hurt, we got Wesley Burleson on location. He's a member of our team here. He works behind the scenes on a lot of our podcasts and over at adfreeshows.com. And he was actually in the stands today with his dad at the Greensboro Coliseum, and he's joining us live now. Hey, he's back home. So Wes, jump on with us, man. Glad to have you on. How was the show?
Hey, can you hear me?
A little bit, maybe a little more volume would be good.
Myself, hang on, let me adjust my audio here. Sorry, guys.
I got nothing.
83weeks.com is where we're hanging out here. If you've got a question for Eric, you can ask it, and we will get to it. I see we've got a handful lining up here. Wes, you got your gear figured out?
Yeah, is this better?
We're much better. There you go. What'd you think of the show, man?
Great. I mean, great. It was you were there for Sting's last match. You got Sting's last match. I'm a huge AEW fan, and it's a different experience seeing it live than watching on TV. My dad noticed the same thing. Like, it's very just, the presentation, everything's just kind of different. But yeah, it was kind of weird. The pacing, just the matches were all just kind of there until Ospreay, and that place came unglued. So Greensboro is not a city full of people who prefer to be standing. They were seated a lot, and I swear they stood up more in the Ospreay match than they did every match leading up to it. Like, just that natural, when a big move or a big sequence hits and the whole crowd just rises kind of like in unison. That happened like 2 or 3 times throughout the night. And when Ospreay came on, I think it happened like 10 times in that match. They were.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I noticed that the crowd, because when I watch wrestling, I tend to watch the crowd more than I watch what's going on in the ring sometimes.
Yeah.
And this crowd, to me, I don't know if this is an AEW kind of thing, but this crowd reacts more to spots than they do to anything else. They're there for the spots. And every time there was a decent spot to be had, then you get the crowd reacting, and then they sit back down again, and they're very, very polite, much like a Japanese audience, until there's another big spot.
They were big for entrances, and they were big for, when you say spot, I know a lot of times with AEW, it comes across like people think of like a dangerous move or just like a high spot, you know, but like Christian, they loved Christian, but they loved, you know, I guess it's an argument you guys can have about, they probably loved what you're not supposed to love. He's the heel, but they love when he's cheating, when he's being his character, when he's doing his thing. People would go crazy. They go crazy for moments where they recognize characters, and there's things that they're trained to, you know, kind of pop for. But
well, they're conditioned. Exactly.
Yeah.
They're conditioned in a certain way. And, you know, hardcore wrestling fans that go to a lot of events and have been watching TV for years and following wrestling closely, tend to be conditioned. So that we did see a lot of that tonight.
And I tend to like AEW's presentation. I mean, I like the wrestling, and I like, you know, I'm there for it most of the time. But it was weird. I'm really curious to watch this back on TV and see, did it feel like every other AEW pay-per-view? It was just different for me because I was there in the arena, or was it, did those earlier matches? I mean, even Kingston and Danielson, which I know I joined a little bit on the drive home. I know Eric wasn't a huge fan of, but like they were beating the shit out of each other. But like, it just, the people were kind of just watching them strike back and forth, waiting for a finish more than, it just didn't seem like the crowd was into it. For a lot.
I wonder how many of these fans that were there that bought tickets tonight were Sting fans. They were there to just see Sting. And because, now that being said, you just said that they were really excited for Will Ospreay. So maybe there were two sets of fans there, the hardcores, who were there for Will Ospreay, and then the casual fans who wouldn't normally come to a show here at this building. I say that not being negative, just saying last time they did TV here, there's 5,000 and something. This time there's 16,000 and something. So something was different. The something was, it was
11,000 Sting fans. That's what was different.
No, there were a lot of, you could tell just looking around the crowd. I mean, 1 in every 5 person, it felt like, had Sting makeup on. I mean, 4 out of every 5 had a Sting t-shirt, and it was a Sting crowd, a Sting there for Sting. But it did seem like there were a lot of, like, I mean, I took my dad, and it's because, you know, I grew up watching wrestling with him and Sting and Flair and all that stuff. So it was kind of, you know, just like, hey, let's go see Sting's last match. And he was there for it. He loved it, but he's not, you know, we went to out to dinner beforehand, and he was like, now is The Rock going to be there tonight? And I was like, that's a whole different thing, Dad. You watch that on Friday. This is what came on last night. You know, like, he watches everything, but it kind of, you know, some of it blurs. But yeah, I don't know if he ever recovered from The Rock not showing up. So,
well, listen, it was a fun night to watch on pay-per-view. I'm curious, you know, what do you think was we'll be negative first, get that out of the way. What do you think the live crowd thought was the worst match live? Like, what was their least favorite?
So there'd be 2, right? And I feel like a dick, but I'd say the worst, I won't say worst wrestled, but worst put together, is, if that's the term for it, was the scramble.
Yeah.
Where it was so many moments of the guys in the ring stuttering and stopping short and not like, no, you go that way, I'm running this way, like trying to orchestrate direct traffic in the moment. Like Jericho and Hook, like 2 popular guys, everyone, you know, but like just kept sort of seeming out of step with one another, and just I don't know if I just don't notice that stuff when I'm watching on TV, because you have the announcers and they're cutting camera.
No, you notice it. You notice it, brother.
I noticed it way more in this match live. I mean, the whole arena, I think, was just kind of like, it was just awkward.
Well, you can't get into anything because there's just so many people in the ring. There's only so much you can do. It's just nothing to get excited about.
Yeah, I think
it's like battle royals in the first 10 minutes of a battle royal when there's 30 people and they're just standing there throwing punches at each other. It's just visually as unstimulating as you can get.
It is funny when you're there live, because, you know, a lot of that is like in a battle royal, it's you take a bump and then you wait for your next spot. And on television, they don't shoot the guys that are waiting. But there in the arena, you see the dude take a hip toss and then roll to the outside, and then he's crouching at the guardrail, just sitting there, just waiting for the spot he knows that he's going to slide in and do his thing. So that one was kind of rough, but yeah. And then the other one was, I mean, not that it was wrestled poorly, but just Tony Storm and Deonna Purrazzo, just like the crowd just could not care. They like Tony's gimmick, but I don't know if they just are not buying into
probably bad placement on the card, I would think.
Yeah,
I mean,
that could be it too.
Maybe it should have been a little earlier. The main event, you know, everybody's talking now online about the Darby Allin spot, whether or not it was too much. What was the reaction live to the glass and then Darby's big spot? And then when we saw that his back looked like Passion of the Christ.
Yeah. I mean, Darby gonna Darby. It was kind of, people that watch it were sort of, even my dad was kind of almost nonplussed by it, because he sees Darby do stuff like that. I mean, he did a version of that spot with Jeff Hardy, you know, like on television not too long ago. I don't remember the exact, not without minus the glass, but from the ladder to the chairs that were set up. People in the arena seemed a little stunned as to what he intended to do, because they showed one replay of it from the far wide, like the hard cam side, and had Matt Jackson not pulled Nick away, or whichever one pulled whichever one away, if they hadn't pulled them away, Darby wouldn't have touched them. Like, because you saw him standing there, and then when Darby flew the way he flew and hit the chairs, he was never going to impact the area where the Young Buck was standing. So like him pulling him out of the way didn't matter, because Darby overshot them completely. So it was, everyone in the arena kind of acted like, man, he just dove through chairs and glass to.
It looked that way on television too. It did not look great. It's again, it's a spot for the sake of a spot, not a spot that mattered.
But I mean, the crowd pops for tables, man. I mean, it's they tables, ladders, all that stuff. They pop, and they were popping for everything Sting did.
Did you guys notice there was one point during that match when Darby went for the ladder, and I thought the ladder was going to pin Darby. You know,
yeah,
because it was a tall ladder. Like, I mean, and moving ladders around can be a little tricky. And now you're in a ring, and the ring is a little spongy, so you're balanced. And I saw him moving that ladder around, and he started to go, whoa! I thought, man, looks like a Roadrunner cartoon here in a minute.
Darby's a little guy. That was a big ladder. Did they, Conrad? I'm curious. Did they ever show Lex and Magnum and DDP? Were they seated front row, or?
Yeah, they were on the floor, and Denise posted a video of them taking their seat on the floor, but I think it was, they weren't supposed to be acknowledged
on camera. I got you. Yeah, because they
walked
out right in front of us.
I don't know if it made the pay-per-view broadcast, but there was a point at the end that I was watching right before we started doing this, where Sting went by and gave Magnum a hug, and you saw everybody there, Nikita. But again, I don't know if that made the pay-per-view.
That was not on the pay-per-view. That was on the kayfabe.
I was curious, kind of going into it about is Sting going to lose? Is he going to go out putting someone over, or is he going to go out and win? Like, and I mean, the vibe in the arena, dude, like if he would have lost,
it would have been terrible.
Place would have rioted. Like it would have. And because I mean, the Young Bucks, they had that whole sequence where they just kept hitting Sting with stuff. And there was a part of people that thought, oh, they're going to pin him one of these times.
Yes.
But yeah, everything Sting did, people just went crazy for. They were there to be crazy for Sting, and it gave them that opportunity. But
well, here's the thing: by taking Darby out, so he couldn't break up a pin or yank a referee's leg and pull him out of the ring or whatever, it made every false finish on Sting more plausible.
Yeah.
So I mean, it totally made sense the way they structured it, the way they did. But I knew when I saw the glass, this is going to be controversial, and I did not expect it to eat up Darby like that. Overall, though, you've seen a bunch of pay-per-views. I know you've been to a few AEW shows before. As far as the live fan experience, do you think fans left happy? It was thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle?
I think they for sure left happy. I mean, for the fact of, showing up for Sting and getting, I think the Sting match was a success. Darby's going to do what Darby does. And it was, it was what I think most people expected when they said it was a tornado tag. It was like, okay, there's going to be Gaga and tables and ladders, and they're just going to, go spot to spot. But I mean, people got to cheer and got to celebrate. I think what caught me the most, aside from seeing the crowd react so much to Ospreay, this is kind of playing back on that, but there was a moment when Ospreay and Takeshita were going into the sequence, the finishing sequence of their match, and so we're seated first level up, but like right on the front row of the first level up. So right in front of us is all like the security staff that's kind of working the event and checking people's tickets as they come out to the floor. When Ospreay and Takeshita, once they're going and going and going, and the whole arena stood up and everyone was, kind of going crazy. I saw the security people stop and look around. They were getting their phones out and recording the crowd. Like you could tell they had not seen that kind of energy. And I think anyone who went to that show, whether they were an AEW fan or they just love Sting, I am so curious to see if they tune in for Ospreay.
Right.
Because that dude, I mean, if he can't, I love Will Ospreay, but I watch New Japan. I watch wrestling. I watch, all that stuff. So like, I know Ospreay, but like the way the crowd reacted to him completely floored me. Like it was second only to Sting. And
I hope AEW keeps him special.
Yes.
We see him every week. Like we saw CM Punk go out and wrestle a bunch of green guys every week. And that'll cool him off so fast if they overexpose him and they don't treat him like the attraction that he should be treated.
I mean, based on him tonight, I could not fathom him not winning the world title in Wembley. But
you got to think
there's a lot of time. There's a lot of time between now and then. But
Wes, you were there. You saw Samoa Joe retain. I asked Eric earlier, what do you think is next for Samoa Joe? Because I think a lot of people thought, hey, tonight's Swerve's night. Swerve's going to win the title. They did not do that. I know some people were suspecting that perhaps when Swerve got hot last year, Samoa Joe might be a transitional champion. Doesn't feel that way now. It feels like he's having a hell of a run. Do you think he's a placeholder for Kenny Omega, for MJF, or something else?
I don't know. I didn't expect him to have a long run with it because I kind of thought he got it just because MJF was injured and had to leave, and he was what was booked as his challenger when that all happened. But I tell you, man, watching the show, Joe brings a credibility to it. Like
yes.
he knows how to do an interview. He knows how to compose himself. He knows how to, he's a general in there, and you sense that. I love Hangman. I love Strickland, and Swerve will have his day. But I think right now Joe is, for AEW to be struggling the way they are, I think he's a very good foundation. And honestly, I wouldn't be mad if he held it until Wembley and he dropped it to Ospreay. But I think Ospreay is ultimately where you have to get that belt, based strictly on just the number of people standing up involuntarily tonight for everything he did.
I would totally agree that the plan, you would think from the outside looking in, is for him to be crowned at All In. Was it apparent to the crowd tonight if they weren't sure that Hangman turned heel?
I mean, yeah, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to say. Like the crowd was so weird. Just like the crowd, the people around me that I heard talking was like, there were some hardcore fans, there were people who knew nothing about it. And like, you just kind of listened to all the conversation. AEW does not thrive in establishing heels and faces. And, you could argue all three of those dudes in the world title match are kind of gray, right?
Yes.
Like,
no doubt.
People were popping for Joe, people were popping for Swerve, but like, yeah. I thought Hangman turned on television 3 times already, but people still just, I mean, well, in North Carolina, right? He's from Virginia. You show a horse on screen, North Carolina is going to applaud.
Yes.
So like, he has his fans, but he did a belly to belly, man. His transition to Magnum is almost complete. He did a legit just belly to belly. I was like, that's all right.
One of the other surprises of the night I wanted to get your take on, and then I want you to tell us just about merch lines and anything else that you may have observed. We switched the title. Orange Cassidy, who's been one of the pillars of AEW for quite a while, I mean, he really made that belt matter. He drops it tonight to Roderick Strong. What was the reaction from the live crowd? Were people shocked that OC's reign ended?
Dude, that was one of those apathy first half matches that just the crowd just did not seem like they were there for it. Like they popped for some of the creative backbreakers, And they popped for like, the faint kick, some of the being orange stuff. But like the title change, like no one really seemed affected by it. There were not heavy boos. There were not big cheers. I thought it was kind of a foregone conclusion because the whole Undisputed Kingdom has had 0 effective wins. So they had to have somebody win something. So I think Wardlow, in the scramble, and then Roderick here, like they can try to make that group something if they're not going to, disband them. But no one in the arena knew what a Kyle O'Reilly was. But he had the shaggy hair also. So when he showed up after that match, I think even we were like, who is that? And we're all squinting, trying to see the overhead screen. And then when they did a close up of his face, we're like, oh, okay, Kyle O'Reilly. But
I kind of was shocked he didn't show up wearing his gear or his own T-shirt, something. But that's the same way they brought Thunder Rosa back before. Tell us about the merch lines and anything else you observed about the live experience today that we may have missed on pay-per-view.
Yeah, I mean, everything was Sting, man. So like walking into the arena, people just Sting. Some people were full cosplay, Sting outfits and robes and hair and makeup, and then tons of other people just had the masks. Yeah, that's the line. So at the far end, like where you see the Corona in the distance, was literally where the merch stand was, and that there were like 4 different merch stands. They all had lines like that. My dad and I were just kind of doing laps after the Double J match, and it was. And when we got up close to one of the merch stands, I did not see like a Hangman, no Swerve, there was Darby Allin t-shirt. There was like 2 AEW t-shirts, and everything was Sting. And they had figures and posters and, the commemorative shirt and just everything. But yeah, that crowd, they knew what that crowd was there for, and it was Sting.
There was no introduction on pay-per-view outside of when they came back from a video package right before the world title match. Excalibur said, now we're joined at the commentary desk by the legendary voice and Hall of Famer Jim Ross. Was JR addressed to the live crowd?
He was not. He came in the same, right in front of me, through the back of the arena floor, and walked around the same path that Luger and DDP and all those guys were brought in, right where Moxley and Claudio came in.
Feels like
that's a waste. That's a wasted beat.
I heard he was going to be there, and I saw, they did the commemorative bats like backstage, and the one
they spoiled it. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, they gave away the JR was there, so I was expecting the Boomer Sooner music to play at some point, and him get, and I know he was walking with a cane, and he was walking delicately, so maybe they didn't want to walk him out, the main entrance.
I shot at the desk as soon as they came back. To Boomer Sooner would have been awesome.
It would have added to the overall presentation significantly.
Yes, I agree. Would have made it feel more special.
Did he do the last 2 matches?
Yes, he did.
Title and Sting. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yes. So I guess they were called co-main events. So if JR is going to call the main event of the pay-per-view, there you go. I want to mention Tony Khan is addressing questions right now. Tony Storm has been up. So Samoa Joe, Will Ospreay, and Tony Storm will catch you up on that and answer some questions. Is there anything else you want to throw at us this afternoon or this evening, Wesley? Thanks for jumping on. But is there anything else we missed?
Don't think so. How scary were the 2 Ospreay spots where that brainbuster in the corner? They don't show replays when you're live, so like. It looked
pretty bad, but immediately Don Callis called out that the right side of his lower back was messed up, and goodness gracious, it's all you could see after that, and it just continually got worse as the night went on.
Gotcha. All right, yeah, but no, and it was the Sting show. I think it delivered for Sting fans, and I hope it came across better than it did live for some of the matches. Just the apathy of it. The crowd, when the crowd was hot, they were super hot. They just weren't hot for everything.
When you, you've been to a bunch of wrestling matches live. You've put over this Ospreay match over and over. Where does it rank as far as best matches you've been in the building to see?
It's up there. I'm bad with ranking and like best all time. I'd say it's probably the best match I've seen live since. If you remember when we were at Starcast was that All Out, All In? Which one was Chicago? All Out.
All Out.
Yeah. The Danielson Starks strap match was something to see live. But yeah, I mean, aside from that, you'd have to go back to like old school when I saw Flair and Vader in Charlotte, or when I went to New York to see Misawa wrestle for a Ring of Honor.
Wow.
So yeah.
So a pretty damn good match.
It's up there. And man, I mean, I cannot stress enough. Technically, yes, in the ring, it looked like a New Japan match. They were doing dangerous moves and they were going spot to spot to spot. And I know it's not everybody's thing, but watching the crowd, like it was unreal how they reacted to him versus anyone on that card other than Sting. Like, and that surprised everyone in the building, I think, because like he's just not been. I don't know. I don't think he's been showcased like that for that audience, you know?
Totally agree.
Nobody knew who the fuck a Magnum was, or Magnus. Magnus. Yeah. Sorry. There was the joke in the section with the guy sitting next to me. Literally, they were like, "Oh, Commander." And then someone was like, "That's not Commander." So they were chanting like, "Not Commander." Like, but the joke, you know, is of how many CMLL luchadors they introduce without paying a lot of attention to anyone enough to get them over or make them matter. So,
well, thanks for making time, man. We appreciate you staying up late. It is
thank you very much
here
Absolutely.
in the Central Time Zone. So thank you for your time today, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
Take care, buddy.
Bye.
Eric, we got a bunch of comments that we need to rattle through. We did a poll. Do you agree with Eric on the Allin spot being a spot for the sake of a spot? 79% said Eric is right. So people are siding with you, Eric. So far,
I'm always right. I'm always right. Who are these other? Who is the 21%?
I know, right? What are
Where
they?
are these knuckleheads?
Will Ospreay at the press conference said that his wife and her child have been so important to him, and he couldn't ask them to uproot their lives to move to the United States. AKA, said differently, maybe WWE never had a chance. He is full-time, though, and says travel to the States will actually be easier than for him to travel to Japan. So that's good news for Ospreay fans. He also randomly said, I want to retire Billy Gunn, which makes me happy. Sean Ross Sapp is also reporting that Tony Storm, when she sat down, suggested, we should just start these later and go longer. That way we can all stay and have breakfast together.
No, I really like her.
And she thanked the announcers, Tasmaniac and Sean Excalibur Mooney, which is super fun. Tony is fielding questions right now. And one of the questions was, hey, what are we going to do with these tag belts? And the answer is a tag team title tournament to determine new champions.
Of course. They were another ratings bonanza.
Tony, apparently, according to Sean Ross Sapp, says Sting didn't fight for the undefeated run or championships, but it's what AEW wanted, so he sank his teeth into it. Probably no surprise there. Let's do a few questions here. Mick Mac has a fun one for you, Eric. Everybody's been playing this new WWE 2K game, and he wants to know if you heard that your rating used to be a 64, and now you're down to a 58. Are you hot about that?
Who do I talk to?
I think you could text Bruce and tell him to get this shit
Who
together.
the fuck is in charge of that?
Right? If anything, you shouldn't have went down 6. You should have went up 5. Everybody knows Eric Bischoff's a fan of 69. King of Strong Style says, do you think it's wise that AEW is doing more pay-per-view now? Eric, I, for one, think that's a good thing. I mean, if you know you've got a loyal audience, 150, 200,000 of those folks who are going to buy every single one of them, shit, why not do more of them? What say you?
Yeah, that's where the money is.
Yeah.
You know, that's the one thing you have 100% control over is your pay-per-view revenue. You have to be careful that you don't burn out your market. You don't want to just throw pay-per-views out that don't matter, because that can come back to bite you in the ass eventually. But I think AEW has a reputation for producing pretty good pay-per-views. Most people leave pretty happy. So as long as they can maintain the quality control and deliver on expectations, fuck, more the merrier, brother. Count the money coming in.
We've got another question here from Donald. He wants to know, what did you think about them cutting off Sting's farewell speech kind of early? That was just the end of satellite time, right, Eric?
It happens. Shit happens. At least they got the match in. At least it didn't mess up the finish.
They've also announced, Tony Khan has rather, that Darby Allin and Jay White are going to wrestle at AEW Big Business in Boston, that is expected to be the Sasha Banks debut, her debut in AEW. Sting has now taken his spot at the podium. I'm kind of surprised to see Sting and Darby Allin at the press conference, but there they are. Jared Kemp says it sucks we didn't get to see Goldberg tonight. I didn't expect Goldberg. Did you think we might see Goldberg tonight?
Yeah, Goldberg and Sting were pretty tight. It wouldn't have surprised me to see Bill there. I'm surprised we didn't see more people there, to be honest with you.
Mick Mac says Sting joins Eric on winning his retirement match. I guess, did you have a retirement match that you won? I don't remember that.
I never win matches.
I don't
think I've ever won. Well, no, I did. I mean,
you beat Ric Flair at Starrcade, and you beat.
Yeah, but I cheated. I think I beat Shane McMahon once and cheated. I might have cheated against Vince McMahon, beat him. I don't know. I never won a match. I mean, I never really won a match, though, ever. And I don't think I had a retirement match. My son threw me in an outhouse, dumped the damn thing over, covered me up with shit. I came stumbling out of the outhouse in TNA, covered from head to toe with shit. That was my retirement match.
Rick's match could have been worse. I didn't
have a Tony Khan in my life at the time.
Yeah. Jared Kemp says, or George Kemp, my apologies. When do you think Goldberg will be in AEW? He didn't even ask if. He thinks it's a matter of when. What do you think? Do you think we'll see that one day?
No. Bill doesn't need the money. No, I don't see it. And if he did, it wouldn't last long.
Why do you say that?
Bill has a very strong personality and a very short fuse.
Okay.
Nah, I just don't see it. Things are a little too hectic in AEW for Bill.
We got another question here from Mike Scott. By the way, if you've got a question, fire down now. We're wrapping things up here with Eric. We're still live, though, looking for your feedback. So by all means, ask Eric a question. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell. We're going to be going live as we get closer to WrestleMania, probably during Go Home Raws and Go Home SmackDowns. We'll certainly be back for both nights of WrestleMania, and who knows, maybe we'll be talking about AEW Dynasty in St. Louis as well. Mike Scott wants to know, how did you first meet Virgil? What's your fondest memory of Mike Jones? I just want to tell everybody, we've already recorded tomorrow's episode of 83 Weeks. You can catch it everywhere you enjoy podcasts in about 4 hours and 45 minutes. But Eric, for the sake of those who haven't heard it or won't hear it, do you have any Mike Jones stories or meetings that you can share with us?
You know, I first met Mike Jones when he showed up at Nitro. He came, I don't know if it was Ted DiBiase or Hulk or a combination of people that suggested that we bring him in. I had never met Mike Jones up until that point. I didn't meet him as Virgil when he was in WWE. My favorite memory is the last one. I ran into Mike Jones at a convention or a signing in Albany, New York, not long ago, maybe a year ago. Less perhaps. And Mike was there, and I've seen Mike many times at different conventions and signings, throughout the year. And he came running up to me and handed me this picture that he had obviously cropped out of another picture, but it was a picture of just he and I together. We were originally part of a group, but he cropped that out. It's just he and I, and he said, "To Eric, your friend, Mike." And he was so happy to give it to me. He just ran over, he was smiling, gave it to me. He said, "Here, I brought this for you," which he clearly did because it already had been signed. And he turned around, scampered right back to his own table. And every time I looked over to him the rest of the day, he was always smiling. And that's what I remember about Mike is he was just so happy to be backstage. He was so happy to be in the business. He's one of those people that really just found joy, being a part of the team. And that's what I remember. It's a great memory to have about somebody, by the way.
It's a great memory to have for sure. We can't say enough nice things about Mike Jones. I didn't get to meet him, but I did get to spend a little bit of time with the folks who help run his social media and manage him. And they just talk so highly about the real life Mike Jones. And Virgil was such a big part of my fandom as a kid. It's Just sad to see it come to an end. It came to an end in a different way professionally tonight for Sting. He is at the table with Tony Khan. I'm sure if anything else happens, we will be talking about it in the future on 83 weeks, and we'll have some other comments here. But Sean Ross Sapp has reported that Sting said something along the lines of he didn't feel like he had the full package of what he wanted to leave wrestling on in either TNA or WWE, but it was kind of there in TNA, but he said it felt right in AEW. And no matter what sort of tribalism you believe in, if you're an AEW fan, you hate AEW. If you're a wrestling fan, you're probably a Sting fan. And if you're a Sting fan, man, you probably should want what Sting wanted. And if he wanted a tornado tag with his sons and Panes of Glass and the Young Bucks and AEW at the Greensboro Coliseum, then I'm happy for him. How about you, Eric?
Me too. That's, we talked about this before the event, the last couple of weeks, talking about what we expect and what we hope for. And I was just hoping Sting left the building with a big smile on his face, and apparently he is, and he will. And what more could you ask for, man?
What more could you ask for? Indeed. Be sure to hit the subscribe button right now and turn on the notifications bell. We're going to be live sooner rather than later. And here in just a few hours, we've got a brand new episode called Different Than that we're dropping right here on YouTube at 83weeks.com or anywhere you find podcasts. But if you haven't already, tell everybody about the new club you just joined, the Bischoff World Order. Memberships for our YouTube channel are available now at 83weeks.com. And we'll see you guys sooner rather than later right here on 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff.